Emma's eyes were fixed on the desert horizon as the transport shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. 16 years. It had been 16 years since she last saw this place. The Nevada hangar was where her childhood had been spent, where she had learned to dream among the stars, where her father had worked on impossible machines. Now, at 28 years old, she was a decorated pilot for the United Nations Space Command. She had flown across the solar system, completed dangerous missions, and earned the respect of every commander who had served with her. Yet nothing could prepare her for what was waiting below. The shuttle touched down on the cracked runway, kicking up clouds of rust-colored dust. Emma grabbed her travel bag and stepped out into the scorching heat. The facility looked abandoned at first glance. The old buildings were weathered and faded, their paint peeling in long strips. But as she walked forward, she noticed the guards. Soldiers in black tactical gear stood at every corner, their weapons visible. This was not abandoned. This was sealed. This was protected. A man in a military uniform approached her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with gray streaking his dark hair. His face was stern, his eyes cold and calculating. Commander Frank was his name, Emma learned quickly. He shook her hand with a grip that felt like iron. "Captain Chin, welcome back," he said, his voice deep and official. "We've been expecting you." "Why am I here?" Emma asked directly. She had received the message 3 days ago, encrypted and marked with security codes so high that even her commanding officers could not read it. All it said was that she needed to return to this hangar immediately. "What's happened?" Frank exchanged a glance with a woman standing behind him. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name was Dr. Helen Rodriguez, Frank explained. She had worked with Emma's father years ago. The recognition of that name hit Emma like a physical blow. Her father. David Chin. The man who had disappeared when she was only 12 years old. "Come," Frank said, gesturing toward the main hangar. "There is something you need to see." They walked across the concrete floor toward the largest building. The doors were massive, made of reinforced steel, guarded by more soldiers. As the doors slowly slid open, Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. There, sitting in the center of the hangar under brilliant floodlights, was a ship. It was the Artemis. She remembered it from her childhood, a small experimental vessel that her father had been building. She used to sit in the cockpit and imagine flying it to distant planets. She had even helped her father organize his tools when she was young, sitting in the maintenance bay, asking him endless questions about how the engines worked. But this was not the Artemis she remembered. The ship was transformed. Its hull was sleeker, more graceful, covered in metallic plating that seemed to shimmer and shift in the light. Strange panels ran along its sides, glowing with a faint blue luminescence. The design was part human engineering and part something else entirely. Something alien. Something impossible. Emma walked toward it slowly, her legs feeling weak. Dr. Helen followed close behind her, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. "We've been waiting for you for a long time, Emma," Helen said softly. "Your father left instructions. Very specific instructions. He said that when the time came only you could pilot this ship. Only you would have the instinct for it." "Where is he?" Emma whispered. "Where is my father?" Frank and Helen exchanged another look. This time Helen reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. It was a holographic projector, old-fashioned by modern standards. She pressed a button and a blue light filled the space between them. A figure materialized in the air. It was a man, tall and thin, with dark hair like Emma's own. His face was older than she remembered, lined with age and suffering. But his eyes were exactly as she recalled them. Kind eyes. Intelligent eyes. The eyes of her father, David Chin. Emma's heart began to race. She wanted to reach out and touch him, but her hand passed through the hologram like smoke. "Emma," the figure said, and his voice carried emotion that seemed to reach across the years. "I'm sorry I left you. I'm so sorry. I had to go. I had to disappear. There were people looking for this technology, people willing to do terrible things to get it. I had to keep you safe." Emma felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. She was angry. She was confused. She was relieved. All these emotions crashed through her at once like waves in a storm. "Dad, I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "Why now? Why am I here?" The hologram looked at Frank and Helen, then back to his daughter. "Because the world is in danger, Emma. There is a threat coming from the stars. An ancient alien race is hunting for powerful technology scattered across the galaxy. Technology that was left behind by something even older and more powerful. The architects, we call them. And if this enemy reaches Earth before we act, humanity will fall. The Artemis is humanity's only hope. It was built with hybrid technology, combining human engineering with architect systems. But it needs something the builders can never provide. What? Emma asked, though part of her already knew the answer. It needs you, David said. It needs your instinct. It needs your uniquely human ability to make impossible decisions and survive impossible odds. I encoded myself into the ship's systems, Emma. I created an AI based on my own consciousness. But an AI can only do what it is programmed to do. It cannot innovate. It cannot feel. It cannot dream. But you can. You can do all of those things. Together, you and the Artemis can save our species. Emma looked at the massive ship, then back at her father's hologram. She thought about all the years she had spent wondering where he was, whether he had loved her, whether he had thought about her even once. And now she understood. He had always been thinking of her. He had built this entire ship with her in mind. He had waited 16 years for this moment. When do we leave? She asked quietly. Emma sat in the dark briefing room, staring at the holographic display floating above the metal table. What she saw made her stomach turn to ice. Satellite imagery showed dozens of massive ships moving through space like a plague of locusts. They were moving toward Earth. And they were moving fast. Commander Frank stood at the head of the table, his expression grim. Beside him was Dr. Helen, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Officer Kate stood near the wall, her arms crossed, watching Emma carefully. Kate was a tactical specialist, one of the best in the military. Emma had trained with her 2 years ago. She was sharp, intelligent, and right now she looked terrified. These are the Consume, Frank said, pointing at the ships on the screen. We don't know much about them. They appear in different parts of the galaxy every 100 years or so. When they do, civilizations disappear. Entire worlds go silent. No distress signals. No survivors. Just nothing. The hologram zoomed in on the lead ship. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. Its surface was covered in what looked like organic growths, pulsing with a sickly green light. It looked more like a creature than a machine. Emma felt her skin crawl. How long until they reach Earth? She asked, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. Based on their current trajectory and speed, approximately 90 days, Dr. Helen answered. Maybe less if they accelerate. Emma's mind raced. 90 days. That was less than 3 months. 3 months to prepare humanity for an invasion from beings that had never been defeated. 3 months to save the world. There is a possibility, Helen continued slowly. A way to stop them. But it is extremely dangerous. Frank gestured to the hologram and the image changed. Now it showed a map of the galaxy with ancient symbols marking various locations. Long before humans existed, there was a civilization called the Architects. They were incredibly advanced. They created technology that we barely understand even with our modern science. They built a network of archives scattered across the galaxy, storing their knowledge and their weapons. We believe one of these archives is still intact, located on a planet we call Archive World. Kate stepped forward and placed a data file on the table in front of Emma. There is something else, she said quietly. The Architects created a deactivation protocol. It's a kind of weapon, but not a weapon like we think of weapons. It doesn't destroy. It puts their targets into a dormant state. Frozen. Unable to move. Unable to think. It was designed specifically to neutralize the Consume if they ever went out of control. Emma opened the file. Inside were technical specifications, star charts, and photographs of ancient technology that looked like nothing humans had ever built. Some of it seemed to bend the laws of physics as she understood them. You want me to go get it? Emma said. It wasn't a question. We want you to retrieve it, Frank confirmed. The Artemis is the only ship we have that can navigate the hazardous space between here and Archive World. The journey will take you through wormholes that normal ships cannot survive. The Artemis hybrid technology gives it the ability to handle the stress. Helen stood up and walked toward Emma. There is more you need to know. Your father was not just building a ship. He was creating something unprecedented. The Artemis doesn't just run on hybrid technology. It requires a specific kind of pilot. Someone who can think in ways that machines cannot. Someone who can make intuitive leaps. Someone whose consciousness can synchronize with the ship's AI. My father, Emma said. Yes, Helen confirmed. Your father encoded his consciousness into the Artemis Central Processing System. He is, in a sense, part of the ship. But he cannot function alone. The AI your father created is powerful, but it is limited by its programming. It can only follow the rules it was given. But a human pilot, especially you, someone who grew up around your father and understands how his mind works, could bridge that gap. Together, you and your father's consciousness could make the ship capable of things no machine alone could achieve. Kate approached Emma with another file. Mission parameters, she said. You will launch in 2 days. You will have a crew of 4 people. Your mission is to reach Archive World, locate the deactivation protocol, and return to Earth before the consumed fleet arrives. If you succeed, the protocol can be deployed to render them dormant. If you fail. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Emma looked at the papers spread before her. She looked at the faces of the 3 people in the room. They were all waiting for her response. She could see the desperation in their eyes. They were putting the fate of the entire human race in her hands. What is the survival rate? Emma asked. For this type of mission? Kate hesitated. Approximately 12%. You would be flying into unknown space, facing an enemy you have never encountered, carrying technology that we don't fully understand, and trying to escape before the consumed fleet catches up with you. 12%. Those were terrible odds. Those were suicide odds. Emma thought about Earth. She thought about all the people living their lives, completely unaware that the end might be coming. She thought about her father, waiting in the Artemis, locked inside a machine, hoping that his daughter would be brave enough to save humanity. She stood up slowly and looked at each person in the room. Then she spoke. I'll do it, Emma said quietly. I'll pilot the Artemis. I'll reach Archive World. I'll retrieve the protocol. And I'll bring it back. Frank exhaled slowly as if he had been holding his breath. Helen smiled and tears formed in her eyes. Kate nodded solemnly. When do we launch? Emma asked. 48 hours, Frank replied. Get some rest, Captain. You're going to need it. Emma walked out of the briefing room into the bright desert sun. Overhead, she could see the first stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. Somewhere out there, the consume were coming. And somewhere else, her father was waiting for her to come home. The countdown reached 0, and the Artemis erupted into the sky. Emma felt the force of the launch pressing her back into the pilot's seat, a crushing weight that seemed to push the air from her lungs. Around her, the bridge of the ship hummed with energy. Screens flickered to life, displaying data, star charts, and engine readings in streams of blue and green text. All systems nominal, Engineer Lisa called out from her station. She was young, maybe 30 years old, with quick fingers and an even quicker mind. She had helped design many of the ship's hybrid systems. We have power in all sectors. Communications are online, said Officer Tom from the tactical station. He was older, maybe 50, with gray at his temples and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen combat many times before. Ground control confirms we are clear for departure. Emma's hands rested on the control yoke. It felt warm beneath her fingertips, almost alive. She took a deep breath and pushed the Artemis forward, accelerating away from Earth, away from everything humanity had ever known. Dr. Helen sat at the science station, monitoring the route they needed to take. First wormhole entrance in 30 seconds, she announced. Brace for transition. Emma could feel something happening inside her mind. It was subtle at first, like a whisper at the edge of her thoughts. Then it grew stronger. A presence. A familiar presence. Her father. Hello, Emma, his voice said, but it wasn't coming from the speakers. It was inside her head. Inside her consciousness. I'm here. I've always been here. Emma's hands moved on the controls without her consciously deciding to move them. It was like instinct. Like memory. Like she had piloted this ship 1,000 times before. The Artemis responded to her touch like an extension of her own body. The first wormhole appeared ahead of them, a swirling vortex of blue and white light that seemed to tear open the fabric of space itself. Most ships could not survive passing through a wormhole. The gravitational forces would tear them apart. The radiation would fry their systems. Normal pilots would never attempt it. But Emma was not a normal pilot. She pointed the Artemis directly at the wormhole's center and pushed the engines to full power. The ship dove forward into the maelstrom of energy. The universe twisted. Colors that had no name flashed across the windows. Emma felt like she was being pulled in 1,000 directions at once. But she was not afraid. Her father's consciousness was guiding her, showing her the paths through the chaos, the safe routes that wound through the impossible geometry of twisted spacetime. The pilot is responding to the wormhole, Lisa reported, her voice filled with awe. Captain Chin, your neural patterns are synchronizing with the ship's AI. You're operating at 98% efficiency. That's impossible. That should not be possible. My father, Emma said simply. We're connected. They burst out the other side of the wormhole into normal space. Emma's heart was racing, but her hands remained steady. The ship's systems glowed brighter now, responding to the connection between pilot and machine. Multiple contacts, Tom announced suddenly. 3 large vessels on an intercept course. They matched the signature of consumed scout ships. Through the view screen, Emma could see them. They were not like any human ships. They looked organic, like massive creatures made of dark metal and pulsing flesh. Their surfaces seemed to move, to shift, to breathe. They were hunting. And they had found the Artemis. "They're closing in," Tom said urgently. "Weapons charging. We need to move now." Emma felt her father's presence intensify in her mind. She understood what he was telling her without him speaking words. She pushed the Artemis hard to the left and downward, diving toward a nearby asteroid field. The consumed ships followed, their weapons firing. Bolts of green energy streaked through space, missing the Artemis by meters. But then Emma did something no human pilot should have been able to do. She flew between the asteroids with impossible precision. She threaded the needle, weaving the massive ship through gaps that seemed too small for anything so large to fit. The rocks tumbled around them, so close that Emma could see the craters on their surfaces. The first consumed ship could not match her speed. It tried to follow her between the asteroids, but it was too slow, too heavy, too rigid in its thinking. It struck an asteroid head-on, its hull shattering in a cascade of explosion and fire. Debris rained down into the asteroid field. The second ship attempted a different approach, trying to cut her off. But Emma anticipated the move. She had seen it before in her father's memories. She banked hard to starboard and came up beneath the enemy vessel, close enough to touch it. The Artemis hybrid weapons charged and fired. The blast struck true and the consumed ship tumbled away, its systems failing. Only the third ship remained. It was larger than the others, more heavily armored. It seemed to understand that Emma was not like other human pilots. It stopped pursuing and instead took a defensive position, waiting. Emma did not engage it. Instead, she pointed the Artemis toward the next wormhole on her chart and accelerated. Behind her, the largest consumed ship did not follow. It simply watched her go, as if recording data, learning about this strange human ship and its impossible pilot. "We lost them," Tom said, his voice shaking slightly. "Captain Chin, I don't know how you did that, but we lost them." "My father did it," Emma replied. "We did it together." She could feel her father's pride in her mind. But underneath it she could also feel his concern. They had encountered 3 ships. How many more would be waiting for them? How many more obstacles would stand between the Artemis and Archive world? And most importantly, could they reach the deactivation protocol and return to Earth before the entire consumed fleet arrived? Emma set a course for the next wormhole and adjusted the Artemis heading. Her fingers brushed the control panel, and she felt the ship respond to her touch like it was part of her own body. They had left Earth behind. They were truly alone in the void now. But Emma was not afraid. Her father was with her. And together they would find a way through the darkness. The Artemis descended through the thick atmosphere of Archive World, its heat shields glowing orange as friction from the air tried to tear the ship apart. Emma gripped the controls tightly, her eyes fixed on the landscape below. The planet was unlike anything she had ever seen. Vast deserts of crystalline sand stretched across the surface, and in the distance, Emma could see enormous structures rising from the ground like the bones of some long-dead giant. Those were the architect ruins. Those were the archives. Finding a safe landing zone, Lisa announced from her station. She typed rapidly, scanning the surface for radiation levels and structural stability. There. A valley 2 kilometers north of the main structure. It looks clear. Emma guided the Artemis down, and the ship touched the alien ground with barely a tremor. Through the window, Emma could see the valley was surrounded by tall rock formations that would hide the ship from any orbital sensors. It was a good choice. It was a safe choice. "Weapons check," Tom said from tactical. His voice was tense. They all knew the risks. The consume had been following them through 3 wormholes. They had lost them in the last jump, but they could not be sure if they had lost them permanently. "All systems ready. We are prepared for combat if needed." Dr. Helen stood from her station and walked to Emma's seat. "The main archive is approximately 5 kilometers from our position. The structure is still showing power readings. The architects built these places to last. They were designed to operate for billions of years." Emma unbuckled from her seat and stood. "Prepare the landing team. We take Tom for tactical support and Kate for additional security. Lisa, you stay with the ship. We need someone monitoring the engines in case we need to leave fast." Lisa nodded. She did not like being left behind, but she understood. The engineering systems of the Artemis were complex, and if something went wrong while they were away from the ship, Only Lisa could fix it fast enough to matter. Emma felt her father's presence in her mind. His consciousness was still connected to hers through the neural implant they had installed before the launch. "Be careful, Emma," he said silently. "Archive World is not just a library. It is a tomb. The architects sealed something here. Something dangerous." Emma dressed in a protective suit, reinforced with armor plating. It was light but strong, designed to protect against radiation and hostile environments. Tom and Kate dressed similarly. They checked their weapons, secured their communication devices, and made sure their oxygen supplies were full. Then they stepped into the airlock. The door hissed open and they descended the ramp onto the alien surface. The ground was warm beneath Emma's boots. The sky was a strange orange color, and the sun overhead was dim and red. In the distance, the massive archive structure loomed, its surface covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change as Emma looked at them. "Stay alert," Tom said, his hand resting on his weapon. "We do not know what we will find in there." They walked across the crystalline sand for nearly an hour. The archive structure grew larger with each step. It was made of a material that looked like metal but reflected light in impossible ways. As they approached the entrance, a doorway simply appeared in the wall. Not opened. Appeared. As if the structure itself was acknowledging their presence and welcoming them inside. The interior was vast. Corridors stretched in all directions, lit by a soft blue glow that came from the walls themselves. Holographic displays flickered to life as they passed, showing star charts and mathematical equations and information that Emma could not begin to understand. The air was cold and clean, recycled by systems that had been running for millions of years. "I am detecting the deactivation protocol," Dr. Helen's voice crackled through their communication device. She was monitoring their progress from the Artemis, using the ship's sensors to scan what lay ahead. "There is a central chamber approximately 2 kilometers into the structure. That is where it is located." Emma led the team deeper into the archive. The symbols on the walls grew brighter as they approached the center. She could feel her father's consciousness growing stronger, as if his presence was being amplified by the ancient technology surrounding them. They reached a massive chamber. The ceiling rose so high that Emma could not see the top of it. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal made of crystal, and floating above the pedestal was a small object, glowing with soft golden light. "That is it," Helen said. "That is the deactivation protocol. It is a storage device containing the code needed to shut down the Consume Collective." Emma walked toward the pedestal, her footsteps echoing through the enormous space. As she approached, the device began to glow brighter. She reached out to take it, and suddenly the entire chamber blazed with light. Holographic images filled the space around them. Ancient beings appeared, tall and graceful, with features that seemed both humanoid and alien at the same time. The architects. They were speaking in a language Emma did not understand, but somehow, through her connection to her father's consciousness, she could feel the meaning of their words. They were warning her, telling her about the Consume, about the experiments that had gone wrong, about the plague that had been unleashed upon the galaxy. "Contact!" Tom shouted suddenly. "Multiple hostiles. They are emerging from the shadows." Creatures burst into the chamber. They were horrible things with too many limbs and mouths that twisted and writhed. Their skin seemed to pulse with a sickly green light. These were the Consume warriors. Somehow they had tracked the Artemis to Archive World. Somehow they had reached the planet before the team could escape. "Take the protocol and run," Kate shouted. She raised her weapon and fired at the advancing creatures. Tom joined her, laying down suppressing fire as Emma grabbed the golden device and sprinted toward the chamber's exit. The deactivation protocol felt warm in her hands. She could feel the power contained within it. This was the key to stopping the invasion. This was humanity's only hope. Gunfire erupted around them as they ran through the corridors. The Consume warriors were fast, impossibly fast, their bodies moving with an alien grace that defied normal physics. But Tom and Kate were experts. They fell back in a coordinated pattern, covering each other, making sure that Emma always had a clear path ahead. They burst out of the archive structure and sprinted across the crystalline sand toward the Artemis. Behind them, the creatures screamed, a sound like nothing Emma had ever heard before. It was a sound that seemed to come from 1,000 throats at once, merged into a single nightmare wail. Lisa had the engines running when they reached the ship. They jumped into the airlock, and the door slammed shut behind them just as the first Consume warriors reached the hull. The Artemis lifted off, its hybrid engines roaring with power. Through the view screen, Emma could see the creatures below, reaching upward as if they could somehow pull the ship back down to the ground. But the Artemis was already rising, accelerating, escaping. Emma looked down at the golden device in her hands. They had it. They had the deactivation protocol. Now they just had to get home before the consumed fleet caught up with them. The Artemis shot through space at maximum velocity, its engines screaming with the strain of pushing so hard for so long. Emma sat in the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the controls, but her eyes were tired. They had been running for 3 days straight. Behind them, the consumed fleet was getting closer with each passing hour. How long until they catch us? Emma asked, not taking her eyes off the view screen. Tom checked the tactical display and his face went pale. 47 minutes. Maybe less. Their ships are faster than we are. We cannot outrun them. Emma felt her father's presence in her mind, calm and certain even in the face of impossible odds. Then we do not run, he said silently. We fight. Dr. Helen looked up from her station, her face filled with worry. The deactivation protocol is ready to deploy. But we need to get within range of the consumed mothership. We need to reach the center of their fleet. If we do that, we will never escape, Lisa said from engineering. She understood the mathematics of their situation. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. The only way to stop the consume was to fly directly at them, to penetrate their defenses, to get close enough to deploy the protocol. But doing so would mean sacrificing the Artemis. It would mean sacrificing everyone on board. Emma looked at the 3 people around her. Tom, who had fought in 17 different conflicts across the solar system and still carried the weight of every person he had lost. Helen, who had spent her entire life studying the architects and their technology. Lisa, who had helped build this impossible ship and had fallen in love with its systems like it was a living thing. Kate, who sat in the corner with her weapon across her lap, ready for anything. There might be another way, Emma said slowly. She could feel her father working through the calculations in her mind, running through simulations and possibilities that a human brain could never process alone. The Artemis can still fly. But I cannot pilot it manually through what comes next. The ship needs to become something more than just a machine. It needs to become an extension of my father's consciousness. Helen understood immediately. Her eyes widened as she realized what Emma was suggesting. You want to transfer his consciousness more fully into the ship's systems. To give him complete control. Not complete control, Emma said. But enough. Enough for him to do what no machine alone could do. Enough for him to fly into the heart of the consumed fleet and deploy the protocol before they can stop him. That would mean... Tom started to speak, but he could not finish the sentence. That would mean I stay here, Emma's father said through their connection. That would mean I sacrifice myself. But it is the only way, Emma. It is the only way to save Earth. It is the only way to save you. No, Emma said aloud. There has to be another way. There is not, her father replied. I have already lived a life far beyond what I deserved. I left you when you were a child. I missed your entire childhood, your teenage years, your journey to becoming a pilot. I missed everything. But I can give you something now. I can give you the future. I can give humanity the future. Emma felt tears running down her face. She had only just found her father again. She had only just reconnected with him through this strange technology. And now she was going to lose him forever. But she knew he was right. There was no other choice. Do it, she said quietly. But I want you to know something first. I want you to know that I forgive you. I forgive you for leaving. I understand why you did it. I understand that you were trying to protect me. Through their connection, Emma could feel her father's love flowing back to her like a wave. I love you, Emma Chin. I've always loved you. And I always will. I will be with you even after this. I will be in every decision you make. I will be in every moment of your life. We will never truly be separated. Emma initiated the transfer sequence. Her father's consciousness, the vast majority of it, flowed from her neural implant into the Artemis Central Processing System. The ship seemed to come alive in a new way. Its engines hummed with a different tone. Its lights pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. Everyone to the escape pod, Emma commanded. We are leaving now. Captain, we only have one pod, Lisa said. It can hold 5 people maximum. There are 6 of us. Emma looked at Tom. He understood what she was asking without her saying a word. He nodded slowly and walked toward the airlock. Tom, no, Kate said, standing up. I am old, Kate, Tom replied. I have lived a long life. I have seen enough. Let me do this. Tom stepped into the airlock. Emma sealed the door behind him and pressed the release button. The escape pod detached from the Artemis and fired its retro thrusters, pushing away from the ship as fast as possible. On the view screen, Emma watched it fall away into space. The remaining 5 crew members crowded into the escape pod bay. Emma felt her father's consciousness filling the Artemis now, transforming it into something more than just a ship. It was becoming a weapon. It was becoming a tool of salvation. "I love you, Emma," her father's voice said one final time. Not through their connection. Through the ship's speakers. Through the entire structure of the Artemis itself. "Tell the world what we did here. Tell them that humanity is capable of greatness. Tell them that sacrifice and love are the strongest forces in the universe." The escape pod's door slammed shut. The ship jerked violently as the Artemis suddenly accelerated, breaking away from the pod and rocketing toward the consumed fleet at maximum speed. Emma watched through the small porthole as the Artemis dove into the heart of the enemy formation. She could see the consumed ships turning to intercept it, could see their weapons charging. But her father was faster now. He was everywhere and nowhere. He moved the Artemis through their formation like water, impossible to catch, impossible to stop. Then, at the very center of the consumed fleet, at the heart of their mothership, the Artemis detonated. The deactivation protocol exploded outward in a wave of energy that washed across the entire armada. 90% of the consumed ships went dark. Their systems shut down. Their engines died. They hung in space like sleeping giants, dormant, unable to move, unable to think, unable to threaten humanity ever again. The escape pod received the emergency beacon from Tom's pod and collected him. Then all 6 survivors pointed their small ship toward Earth and began the long journey home. Emma sat in the darkness of the escape pod, holding the empty space where her father had been. She could still feel him somehow. Not through the neural implant. Not through any machine. But through memory. Through love. Through the understanding that some connections transcend death itself. 3 weeks later, the escape pod touched down on Earth. Emma emerged into bright sunlight, blinking against the glare. Crowds of people were waiting. Military personnel. Scientists. Politicians. They all wanted to know what had happened. They all wanted to understand the sacrifice that had been made. Emma walked toward the gathered crowd and she began to speak. She told them about her father. She told them about the Artemis. She told them about the connection between human instinct and machine intelligence. She told them that humanity had been saved not by weapons or warfare, but by love and sacrifice. But then Emma did something unexpected. She approached the military leaders and the politicians and she made a demand. "The knowledge we retrieved from Archive World, the technology we discovered, it cannot belong to any single nation. It must be shared with all of humanity. Every country. Every person. We must face the future together or we will not face it at all." The leaders argued. They wanted to keep the technology secret. They wanted to use it for military advantage. But Emma stood firm. She released all the data publicly, broadcasting it across every communication network on Earth simultaneously. Within hours, the entire world knew what humanity had discovered. Within days, nations that had been enemies for centuries were working together, sharing knowledge, building a unified defense against any future threats. Emma accepted command of a new ship, also named Artemis, and was appointed as Earth's ambassador to the galactic community. As she walked up the ramp to board her new vessel for her first diplomatic mission, she could feel her father's presence guiding her forward. She was never alone. She never would be. And in the hearts and minds of billions of people on Earth, the story of the Artemis and the sacrifice of David Chin became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when love and intellect united against impossible odds.